Thank you very much from the very nice words. When I was thinking this welcoming lecture, I thought I need to really write something down because I want to think through my field and say something meaningful related to, well, my material, that is clay. So I will be mainly reading today for you, and in addition I will be actually showing you images which I hope you find interesting and maybe also pleasing and touching somehow. So even thought I'm here on the very beginning a kind of maybe speaking something else. All the images I now show on the beginning of my speech are from the first example. I will go through my presentation. I will go through 3 examples. So, as human beings, we are surrounded by the material world, an environment that we are ultimately dependent on and unavoidable part of. Through the recent developments in psychology and neuroscience, it has become generally accepted that human cognition is dependent on organism-environment interaction. According to this view, the human mind is formed by the bodily actions and interactions we have with our surrounding material and social environment. Thus, our cognition is embodied. Accordingly, through our embodied interaction with our environment, we learn what it is to be human in this world. The hands are the most sensitive part of human body and hence the most important organ to physically investigate our surroundings. Because fingertips are the center of many nerves and our hands are able to touch, feel, manipulate and handle materials and tools, a connection between the hand, skill and craft enables us to think through our hands or actually through material. Political theorist Jane Bennett discusses the concept of materiality at the interface of a human and non-human physical world. She talks about vital materiality and refers to a formative power that cannot be separated from matter. According to her, a craft person or anyone who has an intimate connection with things encounters a creative materiality with initial tendencies and propensities which have a capacity to be combined in varied ways. She proposes that the direction in which this power takes the creator depends on other types of forces, affects and matters that are present in the process and with which they come into close contact. According to Bennett, craftspeople and scientists have different relationships with material. While the craft person is interested in what the material can do, the scientist seeks to know what the material is. Because of the different approach, the craftsperson is able to develop a deeper understanding of the vitality of the specific material. This means that she is able to collaborate more profoundly with it. But what actually happens in the dialogical process during which the new artifacts emerge in a mutual relationship between a craft person and a material world? In my presentation, I will answer actually this question through 3 examples that are related to the field of my professorship, that is practice-led research. In this research approach, artists, designers and craft people have taken an active role in contextualizing and interpreting the creative process related to their own practice. Via this subjective approach, understanding about what the embodied mind how the embodied mind proceeds have been supplemented with the knowledge attained inside in the creative process. In this way, the spheres of knowledge, material thinking, and experiences that are fostered through creative work have become entangled and embodied as elemental part of the research process. So the first of my examples is actually from my own creative practice I conducted recently in New Zealand. And through the second example, I will discuss what might be the role of materiality in design education that takes place in the studio context. And finally, I will close my presentation with the third example, that is the project where materials and new techniques are experimented and developed collaboratively. So actually, all the previous pictures are from the very first project, as I already told. So they are very much the second images related to my personal experimentation and exploration. So my own creative practice situates in the field of contemporary ceramics. And as a ceramist, I like to work with the local materials, so sands and stones and clay that are available in mineral environment where I actually work. So 2 years ago, I lived and worked here in New Zealand. In the beginning of the stay, I walked on the forest and the beaches, trying to understand the nature and landscape I had just arrived in. And during one of the walks, I encountered black sand. And this was actually my very first material gathering I took from the earth of New Zealand. This gathering was actually the beginning of the earth collection on which I based my first material experiments, and subsequently the entire creative process that was going to take place during the year. Next, with the help of mortar, pestle and water, I transformed the gathered earth samples into a liquid form. I also formed the clay and made small test pieces that were dipped in the liquids I had made. So these test pieces were then fired up to 1060 degrees. And from these results, I could see what kind of colors and surfaces emerge in the firing of the gathered material samples. And these actually liquids were then used when I proceeded to the next stage of the process and when I started to paint on paper. Due to the impure qualities of these materials, some of them rejected each other's. So before becoming part of the evolving image, they kind of find their own dwell to live, to find their place in the emerging painting. And after creating 10 of these paintings, I moved from paper to ceramics. And because I knew actually that this will be the point where I was ready to take new challenges. So the change from paper to clay had a fundamental consequences to the painting process. And I was also aware that the firing of high temperatures will change the structures of the materials and all the colors, even unexpected ways. So this is the raw painting with earth, with clay, sand, and stones to raw clay. And this is fire. The similar kind of paintings, but after the firing. Because of the plastic quality of the clay, I was able to manipulate the painting surface while making the image. By drawing lines in the soft surface, I instead of sketching the evolving image with a brush, I used a stick with which I carved the image roughly on the top of the clay slab. And only after that I started to create a painting by adding different slips on the top of the sketch. And in this process the nature of the lines also changed. So as I inserted slips inside the carved lines and then after the colors actually they started to run along a line and following the lines I had made, I have just carved. So the whole year ended in Earth Dialogue exhibition, which took place in New Zealand. And I considered actually that this exhibition shows a significant transition in my thinking, because this was the very first time I exhibited also photos and also raw materials and actually tools related to my works, not only the final outcomes. So through this first example, I have discussed a dialogical process of a maker and materiality, that is how materiality is integrally entangled in a creative process. The process proceeds via thinking and making towards the final outcome. This implies that the material formation doesn't come after the ideation as a separate phase of giving form to the emergent idea, but instead the materiality is simultaneous with and intrinsic to the creative process itself, as it resists, affects and affords the opportunities, challenges and constraints on the ideas and possible ways of working. So within art and design education, this kind of working, so material experimentation, is actually often an integral part of learning process. And however, it's actually quite rarely discussed topic. So how learning is entangled with or affect on the engagement with the material, both human and non-human. And I will address the issue through my next example, what derives from my design exploration and experimentation master course that I'm teaching yearly in Department of Design, and actually at the moment I'm also running the course. But this is still from the kind of the first kind of example. So the core idea of the intensive 7 weeks course is to support design students in managing their own creative processes. For most students, material experimentations play a significant role in the formation and framing of the process and the expected final outcome. And one of the most important components of the course is the 5-day excursion to the theme-related location that consists of visits within the local surroundings. The main purpose of the trip is to provide an inspiring and safe environment that supports the students in initiating their own creative processes. And now we go to the images related to this course. And the example is from the year when the theme of the course was religion, and the course was directed to Heinävesi, eastern Finland, where we visited in the monastery and nunnery. Not having tight connection to any religion, one of the students, Gabriela, found the visits uncomfortable. And in her final course report, she writes, "Which was striking to me is that everything was ruled and scheduled, from timetables to ceremonies, silence time, and even amount of glasses of wine. There was no space for spontaneity, and I saw the nunnery's beeswax fabric as a materialization of that." So this experience actually reminded Gabriela of Paul Klee's series of works called Imperfect Angels, as these angels had human features and were thus imperfect in their nature. By following this idea, Gabriela decided to create her own series of imperfect angels by utilizing the beeswax material that she faced in the nunnery. She reports that her work had two approaches, one being emotional and another more rational, that is, to liberate the beeswax and let the material be in a more free way than in the candle shape. So when starting the material experimentation with the wax, Gabriela had actually only initial ideas for what to work. At the beginning of her working process, she felt actually even frustrated as she discovered that she could not control the material nor the evolving shape. After accepting the essence of the unfamiliar material and finding some new techniques to cope with it, her attitude actually changed. What happens to her is that she realized that when working with the material, she was able to better understand the requisite ways of working that she was actually searching for. So in Gabriela's experimentation, the shape was then a consequence of the molding experience with the beeswax, and she discovered that the material gave her more than what she actually expected. The final work, which is here, then emerges from the process of experimenting with the materiality, feeling the materials, and allowing the material to guide the creative process towards the final artifact. Thus, the material had an active role in Gabriela's creative work. It had a kind of agency. As Tara Fenwick and her colleagues points out, material things are performative and not inert. They actually are material and they matter. So the last of my examples actually is related to ongoing EU project here in Aalto, which is called Ceramics and its Dimensions. And our part of the project is Shaping the Future. So this is the part of the project we are leading here in Department of Design. And the image is on the very first step of the project, when we had a one-week workshop with students in one of our collaborative kind of partners in Gala Porcelain Factory, Germany. And I want to close my presentation by briefly showing actually what kind of this experimentation actually, what was the creative process that started from here. So this is an image from the Gala workshop where we are collaborating with lecturers, professors, students and factory workers. And these are the actually just a couple of images of the final results, what happened when we can really use the factory facilities. And what were the end results after the week and the creative processes that followed after this week. And the final image actually is from the Fiskars exhibition we just had a couple of 3 months ago, which was the first venue where we showed our what we actually did there. And this is actually the very beginning of the process. Now we are collaborating with AdLab here, and we have built actually 3 3D printers. And although this is not our main aim, our main aim is not technically build 3D printers, but our main aim is to really find out how we can use the material and what might be the aesthetics and potential of this material. So my reading was very much related to ceramics and ceramic materials that actually Turkka kind of knew, but this is something that really matters to me, and these kind of things are the things I would like to take further in the context of Aalto during the following years. Thank you.